freak the freaking theme song. The video doesn't want to work again. I don't know. I don't know. You know what I should do, Diana? Is I oughta try shrinking it. I'll format it smaller and see if it plays more smoothly. It always works just fine in the test, you know. I don't know why that happens. Diana, can I hear you?
Yes, I'm getting my cup of coffee right now.
Right on. I have a Boo in the seat because, of course, as soon as we go to start the show, Boo wants to get up into the chair. All right, so an auspicious start to the last day of April, which means, of course, it's Walpurgisnacht weekend, and we are recovering from the Walpurgisnacht party last night. Our Halloween in April, halfway to Halloween, there on Twitch, here on Twitch, on this very channel, ADDAMBOMBB, of course, and we had DJ Loki with us last night. We were raiding back and forth. We had a good time, and we're recovering from that. Of course, I've got DJD42, Diana, your hostess with the mostess, here with me for Musically Minded. And Diana, would you be so kind as to give us the rundown on all of these good things coming up? Hello, Tans Machina.
Of course. This Wednesday on twitch.tv/MTVTV, we have New Music O'Clock hosted by Pilgrims of Yearning. And then this coming weekend, we're going to take the day off. So Friday is the pre-party for Dark Spring Boston with Pilgrims of Yearning. And then Saturday is Dark Spring Boston at Middle East Downstairs. And some of the artists are actually artists on the channel of MTV TV with Black Rose Burning, Ex Hyena, etc. And then, of course, the following Saturday, we're going to have a retro rumpus.
Fantastic. Okay, so that pretty much sums it up. Yep, we're taking next weekend off, but we'll be back again the following weekend. So yeah, we're not going to do the Musically Minded show next week either because recovery. Mixoread, good to see you. As usual, you know, if you all have questions, in the chat there, and or send them over on Facebook. You know, if you're just sort of if it occurs to you in the middle of the night and you're in a panicked sweat and you're like, gosh, send it over in Messenger or whatever, or over on Patreon or whatever you want to do, and you know, we'll probably talk about it, if not today, on a future episode of Musically Minded, where, of course, you know, the whole point of what we're doing here is to take that peek behind the curtain on DJing, take a look a little bit into the decisions that we make as DJs, how it affects our audiences, and how to be more musically minded in our thinking about what we do. So to that effect, Diana, could you catch us up on where we've been, and where would you like to go today?
Well, last week we were talking about mashups, and we have been talking about transitions and mixing for the last few weeks. I thought if we could get back to the actual title of the show, Musically Minded, and I'm asking, like, what are the mind muscles we need to continually exercise as DJs to become better at our craft?
Right on. Yeah, I think that this is going to be a great topic. So today we will talk about exercising the musical mind. And of course, what's up, Dusty Chin? How you doing, man? And of course, what we want you to do too is, you know, if you have any questions as we're going along, or if something that we're talking about sparks something in your own mind, you know, I think what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about some strategies and some ways that we can exercise the musical parts, the DJ parts of our brain. And to that effect, of course, again, if you have any thoughts, pop them on up in the chat. So, trying to do this a little short on breath today. I apologize. Okay. So the first thing I think that I want to talk about is I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to my own childhood a little bit. I think I knew I was going to be a DJ at a very early age. I was pretty obsessed with the radio, and I really wanted to get into broadcasting at a young age. And I remember at one point I was very, very young, and I remember calling a radio station to find out what a song they were playing was, who it was by. Of course, it was Weird Al Yankovic, but that's how old I was. And like that's kind of one of those moments where you're like, someday I'm going to be that guy. You know what I mean? And what I want to relate that to is musical memory. We've talked a bit about on the show about musical histories, how everybody has their own musical histories, and that would be an example of a moment in mine, right, where this new album had come out by Weird Al Yankovic, and I didn't know who he was, and they played it on the radio, and I called the radio and I said, "Who does that song?" And it was Weird Al. And so Weird Al became part of my musical repertoire and part of my musical history. And of course, I think a lot of us have had that experience at some point with Weird Al, where we heard the Weird Al and we went, "What the heck is that?" And it's Weird Al, and it makes so much sense that somebody who does that kind of thing would call himself Weird Al, but it in our minds, and it becomes part of our musical history. And and so one of the games, there was this TV show, that was on, it was an older than me game show, and of course people older than me would reference it all the time, but there were always the reruns. It was called Name That Tune, right? And these people would be naming the songs. They'd be betting on how quickly they could name a song just based on a few piano notes. Like, I can name that tune in 3 notes. I can name that tune in 2 notes. And that was something that I used to do. I mean, you turn on the radio and you could flip the stations, right? And I always wanted to try to figure out what the song was and who was singing it, and identify it as quickly as I could. Of course, back in the days, you'd hear a song on the radio, and you would hope maybe that they would announce the song at the end of the set, so that you could find out what they just played. And of course, the times that it really mattered the most, they would have said it before, and the part that you missed, which, of course, is something that happens on MTV TV all the time, probably. But yeah, so the game was, and I probably drove my parents crazy with it, doing this in the car, right? Was to flip the stations, flip through the stations and be like, what is this? Who sings it? Right? And then, of course, when you do that, you start to learn, it's like you pick up on the singers. You hear a voice and you're like, well, that's David Bowie, but I don't know what song this is. So then now you're adding another song to your repertoire, with an artist, that's familiar. And that is kind of how, that is a skill, I should say. That's a skill that has made it, by exercising that skill kind of continuously throughout my life, right? Like I hear something, I learn who it's by, it pretty much sticks. I mean, not every time, by no means. You know, I don't have quite an eidetic memory, but if I hear something and it sticks, it sticks. You know, that's, oh, that's that song by that guy. You know. Um, Diana says, also did name the instrument in the orchestra. Well, you know, we can get to that. I want to get to that a little later in the show, so hang on to that one, Diana. um, Another thing that used to do as a kid, right, is, you know, you'd get the records, you know, or the cassettes, and they would have the liner notes. You know, it might have lyrics in there or whatever, but it was always really nice, you know, when they had the lyrics in there too. But like, it would always tell you who the players were on the record, because it's like, you know, you'd have like the main name or whatever on the record, you know, it's like Rod Stewart or whatever, you know what I mean? Like sometimes it was the bands, you know, and it would be the members of the band that played on it, but then there would be like, you know, musicians that played on certain songs maybe, and so you'd start to connect these musicians to those musicians. You know, you start to find things like, you know, like, oh, I liked that record that this bass player played on, so maybe I'll like this other record that the bass player played on, even though it's a completely different composer or band leader or whatever it is. And another thing, of course, would be producers, right? When I would be reading these things as a child, I said, you know, what is this producer? As be like, well, I really like this record produced by Rick Rubin, and I really like this other record produced by Rick Rubin. It's like you start to learn the commonalities that the producers bring, you know, to different artists, to working with different artists, and you start to sort of identify the sort of sound space that they like to use. Oh, that all ephemeral sound space, you know. But you start to hear the way that different producers, and so if you like a producer, you like this record, it was produced by this producer. Maybe you go and you find some other stuff by that producer, and in fact, in my DJ, that's how I found some of like the best stuff, like the best remixes and like the freshest new stuff is like, you know, I find a producer and I'm like, ah, this producer's really doing cool shit. What else did they do? Who else are they playing with? You know, who else is in their idiom, right? You know, that's another thing too, is like, if you like something, you know, and like the band is like, we're, you know, psychedelic progressive techno, and then you go and you look for more stuff where, you know, the artists are identifying as psychedelic progressive techno because you know, you like that sound, and you're going to find more stuff. You know, it's kind of like the recommended if you like feature, right? Like, what was that? It was one of the old record stores used to do that. They had these little, you know, it was like, you know, if you like this, check out these other artists. Recommended if you like. You know, a lot of record stores did that. Um, and of course, these days, you know, it's like, you know, you have things like, you know, Pandora, Spotify, YouTube, and all that kind of stuff. So so it'll just kind of continue to surf you through stuff. You know, you can skip it if you want to, you know, at least until you run out of skips on your free subscription, because, you know, because we're cheap. Anyway, you know, we have tools like Shazam too. The, you know, DJs, we have a love-hate relationship with Shazam, right? Because we love Shazam because we can be at the mall and be like, hey, what's that song they're playing? And you hold up the Shazam and you're like, oh, cool. And then you go look it up and you find like a cool remix of it or something that you drop into your set. But then some other asshole is like standing there in the club Shazamming the track that you're playing, and they play it, you know, in their set next week. The love-hate relationship with Shazam. But I love Shazam, and not for nothing, DJs, when I'm listening to your sets, if I hear something that I don't know, I might Shazam you, because I really like to know what that song is and who does it. And like I said, that's something that started for me as a child. And I think it's a great game to play, to do that kind of name that tune thing. When I'm listening to other DJ sets or listening to, one of the streaming services or whatever, I totally do that. Like I'm kind of like, I want to figure out what it is. As soon as those first few notes drop, I'm like, do I know this? Do I know this? And it's part of the reasons that I love jazz so much, right? Is that, you get these really, really different versions of iconic songs. And, that's actually a very real thing too. Like, in our minds, like, so we'll listen to a record like over and over and over again, and then we have this like really, it's the archetype version. There's a word for it, and it's driving me crazy that I can't think of what the word is. But we create this sort of perfect version of the song in our mind, right? Because we know the song, like lick for lick, and then when we go see the artist perform it live, we're like really struck by the differences, right, of the way that they perform it, as compared to this, iconic or idyllic version that we have in our mind of what that song is. And of course, one of the great things about jazz is that jazz is all about reinterpreting melodies and creating new melodies and soloing and all of that kind of thing from there. So never a bad idea, mind you. And this is again part of the, exercising the musical muscles in your mind, your musical memory, your musical expanding your musical repertoire, really helps with that. The more that you check out, the more you step out of the quote unquote comfort zone, which is stuff that the more it expands your musical knowledge just by exposure. Like go out, listen to fucking weird stuff, listen to stuff that you don't know, and you end up finding things that you really love that it's like sometimes it's like the influences of the influences of your influences, you know what I mean? And you start to dig and dig and you find out, more and more about the roots of where the music that you love comes from. And we could probably do a whole show just on that, just on the roots of DJing and the history of DJing. We could do a whole show on, but that'll be for another time. Of course, another great and classic, probably the best ever way of expanding your musical repertoire, of course, is what you learn from your friends. When your friends are like, "Hey, I heard this and I thought you might dig it." They're usually right. They know you and they know the kind of stuff that you dig. Like we identify, each other in a lot of ways by especially as DJs, right? If you're a resident DJ in a club, right, and people come up and they request certain songs all the time, and you're like, well, okay, if you like this song by this guy, you're gonna like this other song by this artist, and you put them on the dance floor, and like, every time you're at the club, it's like some people come every week, but some people can only come out like once a month or every couple of months or whatever, and then you see them show up and you're like, hey, I want to put that person on the dance floor. And so like you identify them and you say, oh, well, that person likes this and this other thing. So let's see if I can get them onto the dance floor with this, and then we'll keep them there, by playing something, from our own repertoire that we think that they would like. It's part of one of the great things about being a DJ, and one of the things that often drives us to become DJs is because we love music and we want to share it with our friends. We find something cool and we want, it's like, hey, look at this really shiny rock. Check it out, everybody. Here's this really cool shiny rock. But the nice thing about music is that, like, like with a shiny rock, like a shiny object, you can only have the one. But with music, we live in this age where we can do things like make mixtapes. Well, I mean, it would have been making mixtapes 40 years ago now. But we can make playlists and share playlists, right? We can give friends music on a thumb drive, right? We can share music with other DJs and say like, hey, I could use some help learning this stuff because I have a gig doing that and I don't really know that style of music and you know it really well, but maybe you don't know this other style of music that I'm really into and I can educate you. And that's a fantastic way to learn music, especially cross culturally. Um, and of course, the more that you expand your musical knowledge, the more that you expand your repertoire, um, the the more, well, first of all, the greater diversity you can bring to your gigs, the greater diversity of gigs you can accept and feel comfortable performing at. Um, but also, the better you can connect to a diversity of audiences, right? Like if you can understand where people are coming from musically, and we've talked about this before, like scatterbug sets. When you're doing weddings in the beginning of the night, you play a little bit of everything, but big hits from every genre to see what they're grooving on, and try to dial in the audience and say, okay, well, if they're really digging this, they're going to like this, and if they dig this, they're going to like this. And the more that you expand your musical repertoire, the more of those connections your brain is making. The more connections that you make in your brain, you are literally growing connections in your brain, neural networks in your brain, and that is a huge part of exercising the musical memory, and using it as well, in your DJ career. Looks at it like the time is flying already, and I have only gotten through the first part. But before I move on to my next my next of several thoughts on the topic today, I want to check in with Diana and see if she had any other thoughts to add to that before I continue on expanding repertoire.
I think you hit all the notes there. Um, I was actually going to ask, like, what are maybe some of the mind games you play to exercise those muscles?
Well, like I said before, I mean, really, it's like so like name that tune is a big one. Uh, um, yeah, I think the real strategy there is that what you're really doing is you're continually collecting, and the more that you experiment with putting things together, the more things that you find go together, if that makes sense. I think I can get to that a little bit further, as we go along here. But uh, before too long, I want to get on to talking a bit about mic. Well, becoming a mic controller, not so much mic control. I don't mean like gain staging and the proper distance from your microphone or any of those kind of things. I'm talking about like being in control when you're on the microphone, like not feeling bad about being an idiot like I am every single time I get on the microphone. Stage fright to some degree. I've definitely said before, like, if I ever stop feeling stage fright, it'll probably be because I'm not into what I'm doing anymore. Like, you care about what you're doing, and you're going to go and you're going to present that to people, and you want everything to be, just right. And of course, we all get anxious before gigs. I think it's just a good thing to like accept, you know. Um, I find that having a handful of little rituals before you do things, kind of going through and doing your checks, you do your sound checks, your line checks, make sure everything's good, that kind of thing. It's a big part of relaxing, helps with the anxiety. If you feel like if you're well prepared, I think that's probably the most important thing, is to feel like you're well prepared. If you feel like you're well prepared for the show, well rested, properly fed, perhaps. If Loki would say, like, Loki would always bring me a Snickers, is what he would do. He'd make sure you like have a Snickers before I start a show, because having a little something in there helps to settle the butterflies. But some of the ways that you can become better prepared. Ways to become better prepared for being on a microphone, and talking in front of people, public speaking, right? The number one thing that I recommend to my DJ students is reading out. I thought I was wearing my glasses, and reading out loud. Read everything out loud. I mean, not just. I mean, like, okay, so yeah, read out loud. Read bedtime stories. Like, read read newspaper articles out loud. Read whatever's on Facebook out loud. Read everything out loud. Like, grab the technical manual out of the glove box of your automobile and read it out loud. And don't just read the words like, I am reading these words. These words are on the page. I am reading them. Give them character, right? If you give them character and you taught, what you're learning to do is you're learning to read off a page naturally, right? You want it to sound like natural speech when you're reading off of a page. And it's a very important skill, especially in broadcasting, and like especially if you're doing like news and that kind of stuff, because it's like, like you're talking about one thing and then they hand you something else and you have to read it right off the page, right there. It's like, bam, they change it on the teleprompter or whatever, and you've got to just adapt right away. And like, you've had no chance to read the script ahead or any of that kind of thing, and you got to blast through it, and it's fucking hard, and it takes a lot of practice, right? And that's how to do it, is just read out loud, read everything out loud, but turn it into a script, right? One of the things that you can do is you can mark your scripts, right? You turn it into a script. Take the page that you're reading out loud and make little marks that help you emphasize the words the way that you want to, so that you have the emphasis on the correct syllables, if that makes sense. You can mark the words that you want to stress, underline, double underline, like put a little accent mark to, where you want your voice to go up a little bit, or maybe to be a little more serious, mark the script, make little notes on there that help you improve while you're reading it out loud. And what happens is, over time, it starts to become really, really natural, to the point that somebody can literally just hand you something, flip open a page, and you will just start reading the thing. So yeah, reading out loud, it's a huge boost to your skills. And of course, it's great when you're, why is it practical, like at a, why is it practical at a gig? I got a story for you. The very first wedding that I ever did solo for my, the agency that I worked for, the first agency that I worked for, obviously, like, I'd been out on a few weddings. I'd done my training and stuff. Like, I had it. And I go through the whole, like introductions, introducing the wedding party, and, the bride and groom and the first dance and the toasts and the whole 9 yards. And I'm like right down at the very end here. And all I got to do is like start the dinner hour, and then I'm on cruise control for the next 40 minutes or whatever. And I'm on the mic and I say, dinner will be served shortly. Yep. It's called an anticipational spoonerism, by the way, when you do that, which leads to some really funny jokes about midgets and prostitutes that I'm not going to get into. But anyway, I made it worse because then I went on the. I realized I turned off the mic and I was like, all right, and then I went, oh shit, and foolishly I turned the microphone back on and I said, did I say served shortly? I meant served shortly. And then I really felt like a proper fool. Cheeks turned red and everything. Even thinking about it, I'm kind of like, that was really dumb. But that's why I say don't apologize on the microphone. I do apologize on the microphone sometimes, but I try not to. It's an easy habit to get into, is to be like, oh, I'm sorry, that was a really bad mix. No, you don't want to do that. It is, sometimes you have to fake the confidence. It's true. Sometimes you do. Let's see. Oh yeah, okay. Record yourself, man. Get on the microphone, do the reading out loud thing, and record yourself and listen back and see how you feel about how you sound. Take notes, and that helps you to improve, your script marking, and your delivery. And of course, it gets you used to the sound of your own voice, because the voice that you hear in your head is very, very different from the voice that other people hear. And you will, sometimes it's incredibly surprising. So a lot of times in the DJ business, right, we're handing a microphone to somebody to make a toast or whatever, and they've never heard themselves on a PA before. And like the first thing they do is they get on the microphone, or they're like, hello, and they're like, oh my fucking God, is that me? It surprises them. They're like, hello? So yeah, getting used to the sound of your own voice. I mean, how do I say this? Like, if you don't like your voice, you're probably really the only one. I mean, like, everybody's got a voice. Another thing actually that's pretty helpful, watch game shows, man. I mean, I joke about game show host DJs, right? Like, come on everybody, let's do the chicken dance or whatever, get up grandma. But game show hosts are fantastic microphone controllers. Like, watch that old Bob Barker stuff, man, on The Price is Right, the way that he would handle, like, he would just, he had such incredible grace. He just had this very gentle, but it looked very gentle, but he was actually quite forceful way of moving people around on his stage. And he just continually kept his patter going, and like, people would say things and he was just unfazed by anything that anybody had to say. He just has immaculate microphone control, incredibly well practiced. Watch the game shows, those classic game shows, man. It definitely helps. And another way to kind of get over stage fright, especially for musical performers, if you're I myself, like, singing in front of an audience is like perhaps one of the hardest things in the world for me to do. The most anxiety provoking thing is for me to get up and sing, especially my own songs. And so many years of karaoke therapy helped me with that. When you go to karaoke nights, the nice thing is that even if you're like one of the worst singers there, you're probably not the worst singer there. And if you are, everybody's still really nice. Because karaoke is like all about, finding your voice and having fun. And a lot of times it's drunk and stupid, and so it's a really good way to just kind of get over yourself. And I think that's a really important thing that you have to do, is just kind of get over yourself. Like, if your shtick is like, I'm super cool, then you have to really practice a lot to be super, super cool. If your shtick is kind of like, hey, I'm a Muppet, then you get to be a Muppet. It's way easier, trust me, like, coming from a Muppet. Diana, I'm gonna do that thing where I ask you if you have any other thoughts on the mic control, getting over the microphone kind of thing. You've had to do it. How did you do it? Actually, that's my question for you. Was it one of these strategies, or do you have something else there? And I'm gonna sip my tea while you answer and catch my breath a little.
um, well, I know that my voice sounds way different than it did 20 years ago, before a lot of medical stuff like being in a coma and having Bell's palsy and stuff. So I had to relearn my voice. One of the things was you throwing me in the deep end for MTV TV. But one of the things I do is, reading ahead and imagining the script in my brain, but also just adjusting my body, pushing my shoulders back and breathing, like remembering to breathe. That's a big one. And yeah, the confidence, really.
You know, breathing is a big part of it. He said, not being able to breathe. One of the things that was kind of beaten into my head early in the broadcasting sort of DJing thing is like, speak from your diaphragm. You know what I mean? Speak from your diaphragm. You get that radio voice going on. And that's part of it too. Is like finding your microphone voice. Like sometimes. Sometimes the microphone voice isn't necessarily the same thing as just regular old speaking voice. I mean, doing a show like this, hopefully, you're using your regular old speaking voice because it's probably pretty exhausting to do it otherwise. I mean, if I had to do what I call my game show host voice, that I was doing a moment ago, like, that's exhausting. I could only do so much of that kind of thing before I start to get tired of doing it, because it is pretty goddamn exhausting. But the funny thing is, though, I guess, like, I still do kind of do it to some degree. It's like, it sure as hell comes out. I mean, like, we're doing the MTV TV stuff, and doing the doing the shows, doing the DJ shows here on Twitch. Of course, the game show thing comes out. The game show thing comes out a lot, doing weddings, right? Because, like, you're trying to hype up the wedding. Like, come on, everybody, let's get this thing hyped up. We've got the wedding party coming at you. And here's John and Janie, and here's Jerry and Bill, and here, whoever the fuck they are. Let's give it up for the bride and groom, kind of things. Like, very useful if you're working on cruise ships too. It's like cruise ship DJs have to be high energy all the time, karaoke DJs, so yeah, game shows. And what you said about getting thrown in the deep end, nothing sharpens you up faster than having to learn how to swim in the deep end. It's like, sometimes, yeah, you just have to, like, push yourself to get out there and start doing something, whether you're comfortable or think you're ready to do it or not. I do think that's a really important thing, kind of like, well, I've always recommended, like, I mean, do what I did, go out on gigs with other DJs, there's offer to hump the gear just to get the experience, kind of thing. But then, like, when you are on your first wedding, it's like, you've had some training, but like, boom, you're in the deep end now. Like you have no choice but to sink or swim. And, that is definitely a good way, um, to, how do I say this? It's, you have to challenge yourself to do that, to build like once you've done it, you're like, I can do it. And you have, like, you realize how much you've grown, I think is what happens when you get thrown. And I think that's what really happens is that you realize how much you've grown. It's not so much that it itself is the growth experience, but it's definitely the experience that makes you realize how much you've grown. I think that's it's a really great thought, the in at the deep end, thought there. Um, of course, practice, practice, practice. We talk about that all the time, and there's a lot of things that you can do, to practice, to exercise your musical mind, that aren't actually like, on the decks even. You can do it in your mind, right? And so, of course, like, so, we have what we call muscle memory, right? Call it what you will, muscle memory. And by repeating motions, right, we learn, like, I think this matters a lot, especially if you're scratching, right? Is because what you're learning is patterns, and then you're associating those patterns with sounds in your head. And I think anybody that plays a musical instrument is gonna know what I'm talking about. Like if you play guitar, you have to learn the shapes. If you play the flute, you gotta learn the positions, all of that kind of stuff. It's like you have to learn how to make the right shape with your mouth, you know what I mean? And like, and you practice that stuff even when you're not like playing the instrument. It's like, if you're a sax player and you need to like work on your embouchure or whatever the fuck it is, you're like, you just sit there with the freaking thing and just the reed and just blow the reed, right? For DJs, we can kind of do that anyway too. It's like, to be perfectly honest with you, I do a lot of like little physical exercise things, like, just rolling through my fingers in different directions like that, double tapping, triple tapping, doing things like that, because it improves your skills, especially, again, when you're cutting fast on a crossfader. Same thing with like, doing platter motions and stuff, like air DJ, man, like just do it on your leg. Wiki, 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 wiki. It's working those muscles that you're going to use when you're on the thing. And, so much of what we're talking about today is really like, it's all in the imagination, you're using your imagination to improve your skills. You're using your imagination, your musical mind, to bring that to your performance as a DJ. And so, yeah, practice is a big thing. Of course, you've got your muscle memory, and you've also got your musical memory. Um, Practice is how you learn how to use the tools so you can bring them to any situation. We've talked about this a bit during the mixing stuff. Is like, you listen to the beginning of something, you listen to the end of something, and you're like, how am I going to put that together with something else? What am I going to put it together with? That's all the kind of stuff, that's the skills that we're talking about exercising here. Like, what the hell am I going to play, is like, the more you've done that, name that tune kind of game, the more that you've introduced yourself to music that you don't know, the more ideas you're going to have, the more possible connections you're going to make when it matters. And that's what practice is all about, is building up your physical skills. It's like your hand-eye coordination is part of it, your ear-hand coordination is part of it as well, and your ear-eye coordination. um you know and learning the sounds, like, being able to like do it in your imagination, because you know what it's going to do if you turn the knob, or if you, whatever it is that you're doing. to manipulate the music that you need to do in your mix. You know what it's going to sound like because you can hear it in your mind's ear. And so practice, again, physical practice is a way that we can do that to build our physical skills, like our muscle memory. Our timing is a big part of that. Like even just like, you know, you're listening to music and washing your dishes or whatever, and you sing along or you lip sync, you know, you whip out the old air guitar, air DJ wiki wiki, tapping. I was a drummer and I drove my teachers fucking crazy because, you know, it's one of those things, like I maintain perfect attention to whatever it is they're talking about, and I'd just be like, you know, so I'm just counting along in my head, and just rhythm, you know, tapping along, my feet, my hands, you know, playing the drums on anything. Everything is a drum set. Everything is a drum set. And to be perfectly honest with you, it helps you get better with your timing in your DJing too, because for one thing, you always know where that one beat is. For another thing, a lot of the stuff that we do is basically finger drumming, and, you know, some of the techniques that are used in like the three style and stuff is, you know, finger drumming is a technique that is used in modern DJing, and, playing the pads, and your rhythm has to be good. I mean, it has, um, so tapping rhythms and tapping patterns and stuff, like, you know, playing the drums on everything, not a bad way to exercise that skill, right? It's like you don't need a whole drum kit. You just need some shit to tap on. And I think all of those things, you know, I call it serious play. Like, you know, you're just fucking around. But it's fucking around that, like, um it's fucking around that, like, leads itself to discovery, right? Like, it leads you to discovery because mostly because you don't care about the outcome, right? Like, you know, the nice thing about, like, you know, the difference between practice and performance is that practice is practice and performance is not practice. You know, practice is when you get to, like, fuck around and screw about, and, like, you find all these you have amazing discoveries, and then that's the stuff that you bring to your performances, you know, so that you can be intuitive and imaginative in the moment. That's the skill that you are exercising by practicing, and like I said, even just by fucking around. It's like, you know, you're working on your muscle memory, you're working on your ear and eye and hand coordination, and coordinating them all together at the same time. We're getting pretty close to the end here, aren't we? We have about 10 minutes left. So I'm just going to kind of keep on rattling through. Actually, real quick, Diana, any other thoughts on muscle memory and that sort of thing?
Well, I was wondering how you uh, learn to or practice to keep beats per minute in your head as to it. Yeah.
All right, yeah, okay, I got you. So that is definitely, like, all right. Got a few things on that. So counting, right? You know, we talk a lot about counting. We've talked about how to count the beats, you know, using the stopwatch, counting how many beats there are in a minute. I used to write it down. You know, I'd have my little track list for the CDs, or like on the records, you know, you'd put like the little stickers on them, and you'd write the tempo on there when you time it. And, like, writing things down is a way that you stick things in your brain, and you're seeing it over and over and over again too. And, like, part of the trick, I guess you would call it, in live DJing, like we're DJing with CDs or with records or whatever. Part of the trick is, like, you're looking for things that are going to fit with the thing that you're playing, and one of the ways that you do that is by tempo. And so, when you're looking down, you know, a list of 20 songs or something on a tiny square of paper, and you've got a little tiny note next to everything that you've written that has the tempo, you're seeing them go by a lot. Like you're looking at stuff and you're like, oh, you'll see stuff and you'll be like, oh, I might want to grab that later when I change tempo or whatever it is. And so you're constantly kind of remembering tempos. Of course, the stuff that you use the most, you're going to be more likely to use the tempo, to know the tempo of, because you're going to memorize it for one thing. One way that a little while ago during the show here, we're talking about like having sort of an archetypical, or an idealized version of a song in your head that, like, you go and you hear them live and it's different and you notice all the differences. Having having songs where you like really know the tempo of, and you can always call it up to your mind, and it's like you hear it in your mind's ears so clearly that you just know that you're like exactly holding that tempo in your mind, and then comparing it to the thing that you're hearing is a way that I do that. Like, I know that closer is 90 beats per minute, so if I hear, or roughly 90 beats per minute, so if I hear something that's, I'm like kind of like, oh yeah, it's about the same tempo as closer, I know it's 90 beats per minute. I know you have a way that, you had mentioned it previously to me, about certain life-saving techniques, Diana.
When I did CPR, the trick they taught us was to compressions at the same, like staying alive, get in your head, and staying alive is about what, 103. So yeah, that was a way to remember um, how to keep compressions on time for CPR.
And of course, if you've got staying alive in your head, the reason that they use that is because it's a song that, like, it's a very ubiquitous song. A lot of people know it, and it is a song that, because you've heard it over and over again, you have a really good sense of the rhythm of that song and the tempo of that song. And yeah, it's about 103-ish beats per minute. And so if you hear something and you're like, oh yeah, it's about the same tempo, same as Staying Alive, it would be a good CPR rhythm, then it's probably around 103-ish. um of course, when we're DJing, we can muck with the pitch a bit and that kind of thing. So sometimes we find that the song sounds a little better, maybe a little faster, or maybe it sounds a little better, a little bit slower or something. Like it change, a little bit of tempo change can change the groove a little bit. But yeah, if you hear something that's close to the tempo of something that you know really, really well, then it's probably close to that tempo. Dusty Chin, the drum tap idea just conjured a crazy image in my mind of a Simon like toy. Oh yeah, to work the rhythm training. Instead of colors, could be some common knobs and switches on a board. Actually, there are like piano teaching programs that are like that. Where it like lights up the key kind of thing, and it's kind of like a video game. I guess some of the video games are kind of like that as well, aren't they? Like the Guitar Hero and that kind of stuff, where it's going between the different colored switches, on the timeline kind of thing. The drum tap toys that we play with as professionals are things like MPC pads, that kind of thing, and like we have the pads on here, sampling pads and that kind of stuff. um but I will say this, like, Simon was a game that I played a lot as a kid. Like, I was a Simon fucking beast, right? And a big part of that was, that Simon is definitely a game that builds your hand-eye coordination, your ear-eye coordination, and your hand-ear coordination all at the same time, because it's like beep and you're like beep, and it's like beep beep and you're like beep beep, and you're like beep 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 and you're like beep beep beep, right? And so you have to keep it's the different colors all have a different sound, and so everything that you touch, it's like it becomes a very fast pattern that you have to keep remembering in your head, and you remember the music of it in your head when you're doing it, and of course the timing all becomes part of that. I think Simon is a really great. He's Dusty Chin. I miss and loathe the thought of Simon all at once. I loved Simon. Yes, you're right. It was an evil mistress, and it was because it was so fucking addictive. But here we are all these years later, and I'm still pushing buttons that make sounds like beep, 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 beep. Beep 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 beep. But what's fun about that, though, so as we're going to wrap things up here, um I everything that I keep saying about uh as we're talking about exercising the musical mind, like everything that I'm talking about is that, like, that the mind's ear, right? The imagination. The imagination is like the most important tool that we have, and we can use our imagination when we're not even using our bodies to do these things. We can imagine the muscle movements, like if you're a guitar player, you can close your eyes and you can imagine the riffs and the positions that your hands need to be in and how you want to strum the guitar. You can imagine those things in your mind. You can do that as a DJ too. I do this all the time. Like I will throw a beat into my mind's ear. Like, hey, mind's ear, give me a beat. And it's like shaboom boom ga 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 do do ga da da boom boom ga 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 da da boom. And it's, just starts up with a beat, and then I go, hey, what would be some cool scratch over that? And I go, wicka wicka wow, 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 wow. And I start doing that in my mind, and I'm thinking about how I might do, how I would do that with my hands, because I know what the possibilities are. Does that make sense? Because my body has made those sounds with my hands before, my mind's ear can imagine how my body would make those sounds, and it's the imagination that brings us to the next level of our creativity, and it's the imagination that we rely on. Like when we're live and we've got an audience in front of us, it's the imagination, it's hearing it in our mind's ear, that makes us better DJs. We can hear it in our mind, and we say, this song goes, and this song goes, right? We hear that in our mind. We say, this song has beats out on the end, and this song fades out. We have, this song is noisy and has vocals at the end, and this song has vocals in the beginning, so they're not going to mix very well unless they happen to have the right pockets, and that's what you have to hear in your imagination. Like, how is this going to work together? You have to imagine that. What's going to happen when I play this? You have to imagine that too. That's another thing we could do a whole show on. What's going to happen when I play this? Like, again, talking, we've mentioned it before, but like the things that you remember as a DJ are those times that, like, you took a risk, and hopefully it worked out. But you have to imagine those things before they can become a reality. To paraphrase, what's his name? Tim Robbins, or is it Tom Robbins or Tim Robbins, wrote Still Life with a Woodpecker and all that. in one of his books, like I'm paraphrasing here, but basically, like an artist is somebody who imagines something that isn't the world and then brings it into the world, right? And imagination is the most important tool we have as DJs and as creators, and it's the most important muscle that we can exercise is our mind. And I think that pretty much wraps us right to time. Mixoriad says mirror neurons. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, there you go. Connecting it right to the neuroscience. Mirror neurons. That is exactly what I'm talking about being able to imagine what you need to do with your body to make that set of sounds occur on your instrument. Yes, mirror neurons. And of course, we use those in a myriad of ways, and we learn by using our mirror neurons. We see somebody else do it, and we imagine ourselves doing it while they do it. Which of course is why it's really helpful to go out on gigs with other more experienced DJs and carry their shit for them, because you will learn more by watching over their shoulder than perhaps even by watching Musically Minded, but I'm not sure about that. Of course, you can catch all of the previous episodes of Musically Minded over on the YouTube. This one will be up later. And at this point, I'm going to ask Diana to go ahead and once again fill us in on all of the good things that are coming up. And I'm going to sip my coffee, and then we'll say goodbye.
All right. Well, this Wednesday coming up, we have on twitch.tv/MTVTV New Music O'Clock with Pilgrims of Yearning, which we will be seeing on Friday at Dark Spring, Boston, the pre-party. And then Saturday, we will be at Dark Spring, Boston again in the Middle East downstairs in Cambridge for, let's see, Black Rose Burning will be there, Ex Hyena will be there, a whole bunch of people will be there. And so next Sunday, we may be taking a week off, but most Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern, we have Musically Minded.
And of course, we'll be back in a couple of weeks with a Retro Rumpus right here on twitch.tv/ADDAMBOMBB. Spell it right anywhere on the internet. I do appreciate all of your support. I appreciate you all tuning in for the show today. Thank you for a very busy chat up there as well. And I've really enjoyed today. I hope that you have too. Diana is going to rate us off. Do we have a space couch today?
Yes, there is a space couch today.
Fantastic. Then Diana, would you so kindly set up the raid for the space couch? And goodbye, and thank you all again. And thanks for joining us for the show, and we'll see you again real soon. And well, we'll see you again in a couple of weeks for the next Musically Minded. How's that? And I'm going to turn off the mic and hit the theme song, and Diana's going to rate us away to Space Couch. Thank you all again. Thanks for your support.